Hey, how's it going, everybody? I'm Rollshambo, the connoisseur and collector of all things sharp and shiny, and you're watching Grail or Garbage, the series where I systematically and categorically rank and review knives to give you the information and the context that you need to determine if a knife deserves a spot in your pocket. Does it deserve a spot in your display case? Here's how it works. There are 5 categories. Each category is worth up to 10 points. We will rank them one by one, and by the time we're done, we will add up all the points and place it on its respective leaderboard based on price. Now you know the name of the game. Let's check out the knife and find out once and for all, is it a Grail or is it garbage? Yeah, my friends, it's time that we actually rank the TRM Atom. TRM, Three Rivers Manufacturing, the USA company that came out of nowhere, seemingly. And I'm excited. Huge shout out, first and foremost, to channel supporter Eugene Krabs. You know who you are. Without you, this review would not be possible. No, I do not get to keep this knife. This knife actually does need to get back to him. But before we send it on its way, we need to go ahead and rank it. And if you're looking for a regular review, guys, if you haven't caught on yet, this is not it. My regular review of this knife will be linked up in the corner. So click on that if that's what you're looking for. But if you're interested in seeing how well this knife ranks, you're in the right place. And if you want to know how we're going to do this, this knife costs $269, $270. And so that means that it's going to be put up against our premium edition leaderboard. Currently, the leader on that leaderboard as of today is the We Knife Company Arrakis, which has a 41. That is good enough for it to be a Grail. Conversely, the worst knife on that list is going to be the BRS Khopesh, which came in at a lowly 28. So, is it going to be as good as the Arrakis or as bad as the BRS Khopesh? It's it's time that we find out. Let's start off with materials. Now, for the materials on this knife, it's got Arctic Storm fat carbon fiber scales, titanium liner, these barrel spacers, titanium pocket clip. The blade steel is in fact 20 CV, and to boot, we're looking at T10 on the pivot, T8 on the body screws. So that's pretty good, especially considering that we're talking about a $270 price point on this knife. We're getting excellent materials out of Three Rivers Manufacturing right here in the US of A, and I think that that's pretty dang cool. When you take into consideration that this knife was made in the US of A and only costs $270 with all of those materials, we're going to be giving it an 8 out of 10 for materials.
Keep the change, you filthy animal.
Let's move on to ergonomics. Now, ergonomics is a couple different things. It's all about how does it feel in the hand? Do you get a nice grip? Are there any hot spots? Is there anything that just feels off about this knife? What about if you change the grip? So on and so forth. This is also the point where we talk about any jimping, as well as whether or not the pocket clip is good enough to not cause a hot spot, because pocket clips are often functional, but sometimes they can cause hot spots. Well, first and foremost, these fat carbon fiber scales are great. They feel really good, and that's surprising, especially considering that we do not have a very thick handle scale profile here. These are on the thinner side, just like with the blade. Speaking of on the thinner side, there is no jimping on the back of this blade. That is one thing that I do wish was there, but it's ultimately not that big of a deal. I mentioned we talk about the pocket clip. The pocket clip is basically a stamped titanium pocket clip, and you feel it, but it's not a hot spot. And in fact, it's really easy to forget about once it is in your hand, and that's something that I think is very forgivable. It's not amazing, it's not terrible as far as the pocket clip is concerned with ergonomics, but it is there. In a reverse grip, it feels nice and confident. You can definitely cap off with your thumb here on the end. So if you want to, yeah, the defensive reverse grip is totally fine. Also, I wanted to mention that you do get some jimping on the lock bar. So the lock bar is not actually a hot spot. It's easy to actuate and it feels nice. It does actually add some extra grip to these handle scales and it makes up for the lack of jimping here on the spine of the blade. The fat carbon fiber is really where this knife shines through, especially in a saber grip. This knife feels very comfortable. It is actually really good and easy to index. It's a knife that's going to feel very confident in your hand. It should go without saying that when your ergos are this good, it's going to score high. How high? We're going to give it an 8 out of 10 for ergonomics. Let's talk about Fidget Factor. Now for Fidget Factor, I want to be absolutely clear because a lot of people have this misconception that Fidget Factor is all about how many deployment options does it have. To me, and for the sake of this ranking system, Fidget Factor is not about how many deployment options it has. I don't need to have 50 bajillion deployment options for a knife to be what I consider fidgety. To me, a knife that is fidgety is a knife that is one you enjoy using and actuating, that you actually feel a desire to put in your pocket and you feel excited to use. And that can be like that for a number of different reasons. This is the part where we talk about things like the detent, where we talk about the pivot action, when we talk about the ease of deployment, things of that nature, as well as balance. And I don't know if you can tell, but the knife is perfectly balanced. I have clumsy hands and it's really easy for me to index either way. It is running on washers, which isn't necessarily known for having the best action. It's what people consider to be hydraulic. But even with those washers, it is ridiculously smooth. I find myself closing it just to feel how smooth it is. And is it going to guillotine shut? Absolutely not. But because of its really good balance and because of its smooth action, it's something that you do feel like you want to use. This is a knife that begs to be put in the pocket. And for the life of me, I'm having a hard time understanding why someone would spend, the $500-600 for, a Chris Reeves knife when you could put this TRM Atom in your pocket. And for lighter cutting duties, it's going to do the trick. And Chris Reeves knives fans, don't come after me. I get it. It's, those are hard duty knives, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about the TRM Atom. This knife is very fidgety in that it makes you want to put it in your pocket, and it's light enough where it's going to fit really well in gym shorts as well. My point is that you definitely want to put this in your pocket. You definitely want to fidget with it. The TRM Atom presents itself as an amazing knife to hold in the hand and to use, and it encourages you to do that. Because of that demand, we are going to be awarding it an 8 out of 10 for Fidget Factor. Next up is a category where many of you might actually think could be this knife's weak spot. I am talking, of course, about the lock. The lock is all about how well does it lock up? Does it lock out well? Is it a strong lock? Is it easy to actuate? So on and so forth. Now, I have already mentioned just how easy this lock is to actuate, and it's a joy to actuate. You're going to see that it's perfectly centered, which is nice. Lockout is, there's less than 0 lockout issues. There is no pivot lash. There is no detent lash. The lock on this is, it's perfect. This is quite possibly one of the best liner locks that I've come across. And if you want to know what that looks like on this one, it actually kind of looks like it's over 50%, like 60%. A lot of that has to do with how ridiculously thin this blade is. And so it appears as though the lock bar is about as thin as the blade stock. And so, the lockup is ridiculously good without having, any over travel, because if it were to lock up at all, that's how it would. It would just line up like that. So needless to say, this is extremely impressive for a liner lock. And it's no wonder why these knives sell out, especially with manufacturing like that. Even though it's a liner lock, it is most definitely impressive. It may be true that I'm not generally a fan of liner locks, but this one has definitely impressed us and made me think a little bit harder about how I consider this lock type. For that reason, it's going to be getting an 8 out of 10 for the lock. It's time for one of my favorite categories, and I am, of course, talking about fit and finish. And fit and finish is where design meets execution. Not only how good is the design, but also how well made was it? How well manufactured was it? And this is also the point where I remind you that this knife was made right here in the US of A. USA knife manufacturing has been, well, it's been under fire, so to speak. You see, our Chinese competitors, our overseas competitors, have been putting out some extremely well-made knives for like half to a quarter of the cost, which it makes it really difficult for US knife manufacturing to thrive, and that's kind of sad. But Three Rivers Manufacturing brings back some hope. For example, these fat carbon handle scales, they're really good. They're really comfortable. Yes, it's a simple blade design. This is in fact a drop point with thumb studs, but it shines in its simplicity. This is one of those knives that you feel proud about carrying. You feel proud to put it in your display case. There are no hot spots on this knife that I can think of. Everything about this knife is very well done, down to the single-sided captive pivot and the hardware. Everything is great. This is one of those knives that will forever be sold out because the moment that they become available, people hop on it. You notice even in the access of the lock bar, these things all matter, and they just kept hitting one right after another. If I had one huge criticism on here, it's that they got to the pocket clip and they said, screw it, make it out of titanium, and stamp that sucker. And that's what they did. But you know what? It actually works. Look at how much clearance you get on that pocket clip. You could clip this to some fat Carhartt jeans with no problem. They could have, gotten rid of the mushrooms growing in the shade. They could have given us some flat screws there. So that's a little bit of a miss. But if all I have to do is replace some hardware for my pocket clip with some flat top screws, I'm sitting pretty. This knife feels premium. It looks premium. They absolutely nailed it. And this is one of those knives that at $270 is 100% worth it at this price point. To be made in the US of A and to have a really good quality user knife like this that can also double as something that you put in your display case is extremely impressive. And you absolutely have to give them their props. I absolutely love it when American knife manufacturing steps its game up, and Three Rivers definitely answered the call. You can tell because this knife is very well manufactured. It's impressive, and I hope that more knife companies take a leaf out of their book. For those reasons, we're going to be awarding it a 9 out of 10 for fit and finish. Let's go ahead and add up all the scores, and it's definitely on the more impressive side of things. For materials, it got an 8. For ergonomics, it got an 8. For Fidget Factor, an 8. The lock was another 8. And fit and finish was a 9. If you do the math, that's going to come out to a 41. Was there ever any doubt that this knife was a Grail in the premium price range? There really shouldn't have been, because it's a very good knife, which is why they're always sold out. Guys, I had a lot of fun with this one. Let me know in the comment section down below if you enjoy this style of Grail or garbage, or if I should tone it down and go back to my old style. I definitely appreciate it. And if you want to see more awesome knife content, make sure you click on the video that pops up next.